Good morning, everybody. Sorry that you're going to waste some time Sunday morning. However, I still believe that for such a devoted audience interested in developments in last 2 decades in Europe, maybe there is still some chance for me to attract you with some thoughts that I would like to share. Sorry that I don't see you and we cannot keep a kind of contact eyes to eyes, but I believe you are still there. Tomorrow, millions of people here in this city, in this country, but not only in Germany, all around Europe and probably outside Europe, will celebrate the 20th anniversary of a very special event of the fall of Berlin Wall. 5 months ago, we celebrated in my country, in Poland, a similar anniversary of a different event, however, playing a similarly important role in our history, and I believe not only in our national history. That was the 20th anniversary of the elections, which were held on June the 4th, 1989, on the very same day when in China, in Beijing, on Tiananmen Square, army crushed students' protests, students who demanded more freedom, more political freedom in their country. What strikes me is a kind of paradox. Since Germany people used to be known, at least in the last 200 years, for their respect for law, for the state, for the government, for the order, and they spontaneously decided to question that, to confront that, and they protested, and the protest took a form of kind of rebellion. On the other side, Poles who used to be known for their rather rebellious character, uprising, protesting, and so on. 20 years ago, in the still not democratic country, in not fully democratic elections, took a very democratic decision which later on was respected by everybody. In my country, after the Second World War, when this divided Europe was created, originated, Poland was, of course, on the eastern side of the Iron Curtain, and there were many moments in history, of post-war history, when Polish people contested the situation, contested the system existing in my country as well as in other so-called Soviet bloc states. We had protests, workers' protests in 56, in 70, 76, 80. In all of those cases, all these protests were crushed. The government decided to use the force. Nobody wanted to talk with protesters. Nobody wanted to have any kind of dialogue. On most occasions, protests were caused by social reasons. That was a kind of social unrest. The living conditions continued to be very difficult. And as you probably know, we had so-called centrally planned economy when everything was decided by the government, by the central government, central authorities, including the prices of everything. So from time to time, when they decided to raise prices, people protested, and we immediately got in trouble. So, what was characteristic for most of those protests was the fact that workers were not supported by some other parts of society, especially by so-called intelligentsia, by intellectuals, by people in the universities, and vice versa. When in '68 our intellectuals, our students protested in March, that was not supported by the workers. It made for the government quite an easy task to deal with such protests. A little bit different situation happened in 1980 when, after social protests by the workers, especially in our Baltic coast cities like Gdańsk, like Szczecin, the independent trade union called Solidarity was created. This time, that workers' movement was backed, was supported by other parts of society. The Solidarity trade movement became a very popular one. There was a moment in time when it had 10 million members. So with the support of intelligentsia, intellectuals, that movement became something more than just a social protest. It presented also political demands aimed at getting more freedom in the country. Still, the logic of post-war division of Europe was existing, was still very strong, and that was almost impossible to conclude that 1981 experiment with happy end, with positive end. In December 81, so-called martial law was introduced, and that seemed to be the end of the Solidarity adventure, of Solidarity experiment. But something had changed, in fact. Domestically, what was very important was the fact that the protests became such a popularly supported by so many people. On the other hand, even introduction of the martial law didn't change the fact that the government demonstrated its lack of ability to really control the situation and to make a real impact on what was going to happen in the country. The government was strong enough to crush the opposition structures, organizations, but was not able to regain any kind of political mandate from the people, to convince the people that it was right. In fact, people were, of course, divided in their opinions about martial law introduction. It is still true even today. But nevertheless, as I said, the authorities were unable to really control the situation, to stay in contact with people's minds. On the other hand, in the decade of the 80s, as you know, there were fundamental changes going on in some other countries, and particularly in Soviet Union. Soviet Union, which used to control the situation in its zone of influence, in so-called Soviet bloc, and never hesitated to intervene if something wrong from the Moscow's point of view was taking place, became deeply involved in Afghanistan, and then with Mikhail Gorbachev's perestroika, had to focus its own attention on domestic affairs, with more and more conflicts, domestic conflicts erupting in this country, with more and more independence demands presented by former Soviet republics and so on. Soviet Union became less able to react to eventual changes taking place in the countries of its bloc. And when in the end of the 80s, namely in 88, we got another wave of strikes, again motivated by social reasons. The authorities in the country, in Poland, came to the conclusion that there was no other option than to sit at the table and talk with the opposition. To those of you who are young guys, it is probably necessary to underline the very fact that it was the first time in post-war history of Soviet bloc that any government decided to recognize, even just de facto recognize, the very existence of the opposition. And that was a kind of crossing of Rubicon River. Then everything looked differently. In '88, part of the political leadership of my country decided to offer talking to the solidarity leaders. I say part because that was not easy on both sides to come to such a conclusion, to sit and talk. On the official side, there were of course conservatives who didn't want to accept the fact that there is opposition and that anybody should talk with it. On the other side, on the solidarity side, there were many people thinking that that was a kind of trap and that they should stay aside. They should not involve themselves in implementing the scenario written by them communists. So there was, of course, a lot of mistrust on both sides. And people who were in favor of talking had to use all of their personal authority to convince the majority to accept that kind of scenario. Those were very dramatic moments. Even those who wanted to talk, even for those who wanted to talk, it was difficult to accept, even particular individuals on the other side. I still remember that the Secretary General of the Communist Party and for some time Prime Minister General Jaruzelski didn't want to sit at the same table and talk with Adam Michnik or Jacek Kuro and the symbolical leaders of democratic opposition in Poland, believing that they symbolize something very, very wrong, unacceptable. In fact, these two guys, very wise, very bright people, full of goodwill, later on they became one of the strongest supporters of democratic peaceful change, peaceful transformation of my country. But for quite a long time, that problem blocked the beginning of the negotiations, political negotiations. But finally, on both sides, the leaders convinced the rest, and in February '89, they began talking. We had so-called Roundtable negotiations that lasted for next 2 months. Most of the time was spent to discuss social and economic issues, and this is very characteristic, that what seemed to them to be the most important and urgent, then just months later became totally insignificant. In early spring '89, both sides thought in terms of improving socialism. Half a year later, they decide to abolish or decide to accept abolishment of socialism. But one part of the conclusions of the provisions accepted at the Roundtable played real, practical, and very important role. That was a political part of the conclusions. They decided to call for early elections. They decided to, they achieved a kind of political contract. Elements of this contract were to have semi-democratic elections to the lower chamber. I say semi because 2/3 of the seats were reserved by political decision for the representatives of 3 parties that used to rule to govern the country. Just 1/3 of the seats were to be shared in democratic contest. But on the other hand, they decided to re-establish the upper chamber, the Senate, which used to be part of Polish parliament for almost 500 years, and they decided to have fully free and democratic elections to the upper chamber. They decided to reestablish, recreate the office of the president of the country, and the president was to be elected by National Assembly composed of two chambers of the parliament. And we got that elections in June the 4th, 89. Results seemed to be predictable before the elections, but in fact became a real surprise. The Solidarity candidates won all of the seats that were achievable in free contest. In lower house, in lower chamber, and they won 99 seats out of 100 in the Senate. There was just one independent senator. Some people are ridiculing that situation today is a little bit similar. I'm the only one independent senator nowadays in Polish Senate. All of the rest are representing two main political parties in the country. But of course it is quite different and uncomparable. Then one of the additional elements of that political contract was that ruling parties were authorized to present so-called national list composed of 35 candidates. And the construction, I wouldn't go into details, but the construction of the electoral procedure was of that kind that it was relatively very easy to be elected if you were on the national list. But what a surprise. 33 people from that list were rejected by the majority of voters. And most of them were guys from the political leadership of the time. So in effect, almost nobody representing former former ruling people got to the parliament elected in those elections. So from the arithmetical point of view, everything looked like allowing the former rulers to continue to create the majority coalition. And to create their own government. But for everybody, it was quite evident that most of the people supported the opposition, and that was a kind of non-confidence vote against the government. They tried still to create a kind of traditional type government in July 89, but this attempt failed immediately. Then we got a very famous article written by Adam Michnik, the chief editor of Gazeta Wyborcza, the daily, which became the most popular daily in the country, under the title, "Your President, Our Prime Minister." General Jaruzelski was elected the president, and Michnik suggested that the new prime minister should be someone proposed by the Solidarity. This idea on the day when the article was read by the people seemed to be almost shocking. But 2-3 days later, everybody understood that that was the only solution. And in the end of August 89, Tadeusz Mazowiecki was asked to form the new cabinet. Tadeusz Mazowiecki, an expert and advisor of the Solidarity, an activist of Catholic intelligentsia movement, very respected person, quiet man, conciliatory man. And he presented the members of his cabinet in mid-September. The government was accepted by the majority of parliament. What was characteristic was the fact that most of the members of this government had absolutely no experience in governing the country. Of course, for most of them, the day they became ministers was the first day in their lives to play any official role. Then they understood that there was a very strong expectation among the people to make a change. To change almost everything in the country. But in fact, they were not prepared to present a detailed concept of changes. Today, when everybody feels to be free to talk about those events quite openly, they confirm that they were surprised by the development of the situation of the events. So when Tadeusz Mazowiecki presented his exposé to the Parliament on the 12th of September, 1989, what was very characteristic was, of course, the fact that he announced that he's going to initiate fundamental changes in political system, in economy, in foreign policy, but he was not very specific, especially when economic program was concerned. And he decided to be very, very careful when talking about foreign policy of the country. He underlined that traditional, old, existing alliances were still binding, and that Poland was ready to respect all of that. You should understand that in mid-September, we were in a very specific situation, with all of the changes going on in some other countries of the region, with many East Germans trying to get to the West through Czechoslovakia, through Hungary, with changes happening in Budapest. We still were the only country of the bloc with a non-communist government. Nobody in Poland was sure what was, let's say, practically acceptable to our neighbors, and what was going beyond a kind of red line. So just to secure our domestic transformation, political and economic transformation, Mazowiecki declared loyalty to the former foreign alliances of our country. There was a very specific situation in the parliament. As I told you, that was a parliament that was not fully democratically elected. But on the other hand, even on the side of the Communist Party, which earlier ruled Poland, most of the newly elected MPs were quite new guys in politics. I was one of them. My professional career was a little bit strange, since after graduating from School of Law, Warsaw University, I worked at the university teaching public international law for several years. But then, for many reasons, including my personal disappointment with the situation in my country, I left Warsaw, I left the university, and I became a farmer. And I just ran my private farm. And there were many people with similar, I would say, quite unusual biographies, who were reform-oriented. And in consequence, there was no opposition in the parliament. That was the only parliament in last 20 years of political change where there was no official opposition. There was a vast majority in favor of reforming the state, reforming the economy, changing our foreign policy, at least after some time. So it created a special opportunity for the government to go faster and farther, especially in terms of economic reform. At the very beginning, we amended our constitution. We adopted some new political solutions, sometimes of, let's say, symbolical character, but we also decided to liquidate censorship, to adopt very liberal law on political parties' activities, and so on. In December 1989, the Minister of Finance, a person responsible for coordination of economic policy, Mr. Balcerowicz, presented a set of drafts of new laws which, after being adopted, created ground for economic reform. That was a very radical reform. That was possible to adopt it because our economic situation in that time became totally unbearable. That was a mess, a real mess. We had hyperinflation reaching the level of 2,000 percentage points annual rate in '89. It destroyed all of our personal savings. Everybody was tired and ready to accept any kind of therapy under one condition, that it had an element of hope in it. So economic reform was accepted by the parliament. Just in 2 weeks we adopted 12 fundamental laws, and it started on the 1st of January 1990. It will be probably enough for me just to inform you that the monthly interest rate in newly reformed banking sector was 70%, 70, in January 1990. So that was really a shocking therapy, which at the very beginning brought quite unexpected results, because there was still very much a lot of naivety among the people who believe that reform will improve our situation from day to day. Just opposite, we got unemployment, a phenomenon that was unknown to two generations of the people in my country. We faced a very deep decrease of the GDP. In first 2 years of our reform, it went down for approximately 20%. So that was really very painful. And in fact, in result of that, it caused a lot of disappointment in Poland, visible already a year earlier when we got presidential elections. You may ask why, the president was just elected. But everything was accelerated. After all of the changes in our neighborhood, in Germany, with the fall of after Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, after Hungarian changes, bloody revolution in Bucharest, and changes also in other countries of the region, after so many former Soviet republics declared the independence, the situation in the region became completely different. It allowed us, as we believe, to go faster and farther. The political process accelerated in the country. General Jaruzelski, understanding that situation, resigned from his office of president, and we decided to have first general elections of the president of Poland. In 1990, Lech Wałęsa, the historical leader of Solidarity, won those elections and became the president. And Tadeusz Mazowiecki, the first prime minister who should be respected for all of fundamental changes and reforms, lost elections, and he resigned from his office as prime minister. It seemed that the time for populists came to my country, but fortunately, despite the fact that in the next couple of years we got several governments, we somehow managed to continue not only the economic reform, but also, and from my personal point of view, that was exceptionally important, a new line of our foreign policy. In 1990-91, we presented new goals, major goals of our foreign policy, namely to join European Community, then European Union and NATO. As I said, despite the changes of the governments, we were very we all continued our efforts to reach these goals, and finally we became the member of the European Union and NATO, first NATO, then EU. Today, I may say that from the present-day perspective, all those events that I just mentioned to you created a very new situation. We are a completely different country and society than we used to be 20 years ago. Not only in terms of our new alliances, memberships and so on, but we are quite well working market economy. Nowadays, in time of economic crisis, global crisis, we are the only EU member state with positive growth rate, GDP growth rate this year. We are quite a new society. Today we have 6 times more university students than we had 20 years ago. The number of people with university degrees grew for 3 times in that time. Most of the people became much more open, individualistic. They do not expect from the state to give them anything in material sense, like early generation. Most of young Poles are really very open, very brave. They are ready to take risk. Millions of them are now studying, working in other countries, getting new experience, getting more knowledge about the life, the organization of work and political systems of other countries. Of course, we still have a lot of problems. You cannot make your country reach just even in 20 years. We still have to continue restructuring of our economy. Like many other countries, we face problems with the quality of, let's say, political process, with political life, public debates. There's a lot of disappointment among the ordinary people caused by the low, let's say, quality of our political leadership. If you ask Poles if they are really very happy with everything, of course, most of them will say no. But on the other hand, what was very characteristic for my nation for generations was a kind of inherited pessimism, and nowadays you can see much more optimism among the ordinary people. That made things that seem to be impossible to be achieved possible. We even had a kind of anecdotic saying at the very beginning of our transformation in first years that very difficult things we arrange immediately, the impossible no later than on the next day. I must say that kind of spirit, that kind of optimism was very important for the later success, because I think that we can talk about real success of Poland in the last 2 decades. What was a little bit different in our case than in some other countries was the fact that from the very beginning we were ready to adopt radical reforms, to make very deep changes, fundamental changes, but to combine that with the method of dialogue, with the method of convincing the other, listening to the other. I'm very happy to say that we avoid any dramatic scenarios in that period of time. Of course, you may find radicals on the left, on the right, in Poland who would criticize those developments. There are some people who still believe that if there is no blood, there is no revolution. In fact, there was a very peaceful revolution, because if you study, if you analyze the size of the changes they were revolutionary ones, and I'm sure of that. Thank you very much for your attention, and if we still have some time, I'm of course open to listen to you and to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We do have time for questions. I'm very happy that you agreed to take some questions. My colleague has a wireless microphone. It is hard to see with the spotlights, but I see already a first question here to the left, and then we can move maybe to the right. Right here. Right, yeah. Sure. Start in the front.
Hello. Witamy w Berlinie, panie premierze. My name is Anita Seng. I'm studying international relations on Warsaw and Jagiellonian Universities. And I would like to ask you about international position of Poland on the international stage, and because after, so to speak, reobtaining international sovereignty of Poland, Poland seems to be like in 90s getting in all of the alliances, international groups that were only possible. So there were Central European Initiative, there was Weimar Triangle, there was Visegrad Group. But always the two main goals were NATO and European Union. And when Poland finally got into European Union, the first thing that we did in European Union was veto against Russia. So this is referring to what you called this Polish rebellious character. But fortunately, like a year ago, there was set up a Polish-Swedish Eastern Partnership project. So a very new proposal from Poland to Europe, to European Union, to strengthen cooperation with Eastern partners. I would like to ask you, however, because on the opening day of the Eastern Partnership on 7th May in Prague this year, none of the important politicians, let's say head of the states or prime ministers, did not show up in Prague. So it means that the old Europe does not actually is not interested in what Poland is presenting, and why actually cannot Poland build coalitions? Cannot Poland talk to our partners in European Union? What is your opinion about that? Thank you.
I will try to be brief. However, the question is of that kind that you may now answer for another an hour or more. Let me just correct you that blocking EU-Russia negotiations was fortunately not the first initiative of Poland after joining the European Union. Just opposite. After signing accession treaty, when we still were not a member of EU, but we participated in all of the activities of the Union, that was one of the first diplomatic and political initiatives of my country, together with Germany. It was concerning the EU policy toward Ukraine. Let me tell you a little bit about that. It has some almost anecdotic elements. I was foreign minister in the time, and here the foreign minister of Germany was Joschka Fischer. On some occasions we discussed what I believed was the lack of Polish-German close cooperation concerning the eastern policy of the European Union. And in 2004, in September, we resided in the same hotel in New York, attending the General Assembly session. So we had the opportunity to have breakfast together every day. And suddenly Joschka came to our earlier talks about initiatives, common Polish-German initiatives, concerning Eastern EU policy, and he asked me about eventual common initiative concerning Ukraine. Of course, I reacted positively. 2 days later, our collaborators in Warsaw and Berlin prepared a draft of the proposal, and a week later, together with Joschka, we presented it to EU foreign ministers. That was accepted by European Council. And then when we all got negative news from Kiev concerning the falsification of the presidential elections, European Union was ready to be involved in roundtable talks, this time in Kiev, initiated by Poland and Lithuania. So there were also, and even earlier, positive positive initiatives by our country in the European Union. Generally speaking, our position, of course, became much stronger than it used to be earlier. You know, almost 30 years ago, when I still worked at the university, I planned to study in depth the possibility of revisioning of the United Nations Charter, and after some time, I came to the conclusion that there was no such possibility, and that Poland couldn't play any role in that regard, since in such areas, such sensitive areas, the lack of full sovereignty was really very, very visible. This is not the case, of course, today. We can do much more and achieve much more than earlier. However, that requires a very wise concept of our foreign policy. I think that, yes, there was a period of time when Poland caused a lot of controversies, let's say 2-3 years ago, in international relations, in its relations with neighbors, including Germany, Russia, some others. But fortunately, then it changed with the verdict by the people in last parliament elections. So we have a chance, of course, to play a positive role also within the European Union. You mentioned the Eastern Partnership idea and initiative and lack of European leaders in Prague. I wouldn't overestimate the significance of that. You are right, of course, that it would be better if they demonstrated personally and directly their support for that. But on the other hand, we have to keep in mind that Eastern Partnership is still quite a general idea. And in fact, nobody, including ourselves, knows what would be the final outcome. So I think that if we are energetic enough, if we are pushing practical implementation of this concept, we may convince also our other European partners to become directly involved in that, not only to support it. It was supported since it was adopted. It became the official EU initiative, part of its common foreign policy. So this was, by the way, one of the examples of what Poland, acting together with some other partners, European partners, can achieve. But as I said, there's still a lot to be done, especially in terms of adopting very consistent and wise concept of our foreign policy. It was much easier, of course, just to try to achieve our main goals because the direction was evident and accepted by everybody or almost everybody. After becoming NATO and EU member, we had some problems with redefining our foreign policy goals. And I'm afraid this process has not been closed up to now.
Prime Minister Cimoszewicz, we have the privilege actually this weekend to also have with us 47 young leaders from a program called Europe Meets Russia, a forum for young leaders. And we were actually discussing this morning also the importance of also the next generation, etc. So I'd be very happy now to take a question, in particular from the group of young leaders from Europe Meets Russia. In the sense it's not every day that you have a chance to actually be with someone, such as Prime Minister Cimoszewicz. Is there anyone from the group Europe Meets Russia in particular that would like to ask a question to the former Prime Minister? And now would be a great time. Don't be shy. Do I see? Yeah,
from the group of Russia.
If you wanted to ask a... Yes? Okay. Please. And then I think we'll take one more question after that, and then unfortunately we will have to, I think, move to the next speaker. Thank you. Okay.
Szanowny Panie Premierze, bardzo dziękuję za wykład. My name is Philip Kirker. I'm from Germany. I'm studying politics in London. And I have a question concerning the evolution of the political system in Poland. And how would you evaluate the role of the presidents in the evolution and consolidation of the political system, and especially the more active approach, we could say, of Lech Wałęsa, or the more reconciling approach of Aleksander Kwaśniewski?
As I said, the institution, the office of the president of the country was re-established as a part of the political contract achieved in roundtable negotiations. But at the very beginning, that was not very clear what should be the role of that official. That was a that was to be a part of political construction. The president, from the political point of view, has to play the role of a kind of safeguard in new situation. But with President Jaruzelski and that very, very special situation we got immediately after the elections and political changes, his role couldn't be of any importance. In fact, he couldn't be an active president. He was wise enough not to interfere with the political changes, reforms, and as I said, a year later he resigned. I was a member of the special parliamentary committee that was to decide about the procedure of electing new president. Today I may say that that was purely political question, what to do, because the majority of the members of parliament, that first parliament, in fact were in favor of Tadeusz Mazowiecki as the new president. I was among them. We believed that Mazowiecki would win in general elections, and that is why we were so supportive for this procedure. And we believe that it would also enhance, empower him with a very, very strong political mandate. On the other hand, there was an attempt to elect Lech Wałęsa in that formerly existing procedure by Parliament. So it was decided to have general elections, and that is true that it gave Lech Wałęsa, who finally won, a very, very strong political mandate. On the other hand, the constitutional provisions were not in full conformity with the political position of Lech Wałęsa after elections 1990. So what we could witness in next years were many political and constitutional conflicts caused by Lech Wałęsa or his advisors who wanted to push the limits of his powers much broader. Yesterday, Gazeta Wyborcza, the daily that I mentioned earlier, published an interview with me, and one of the questions concerned the Lech Wałęsa presidency. I have to say that I have, and I said that in that interview, I have a lot of personal sympathy and I have a lot of personal respect for him. I believe that after years we both treat each other with a lot of respect. But saying that, I have no doubt that he was not a good president. He was not prepared. I mean, he didn't have that necessary training for this office. The way he thought about the role of the boss of the country was a little bit rooted in the past. I mean, he believed probably that the president should be somebody playing a similar role to the Secretary General of the ruling party. I mean, a person allowed to do anything he or she believes is right to be done. And he didn't accept it. He didn't accept the legal limits of his power. Then we had, and he paid a very high price. He lost elections. He was not re-elected. I understand that, especially in that moment in time, he felt to be humiliated since he lost to the communists or post-communists. Aleksander Kwaśniewski was the member of the last communist government as Minister for Sports and Youth, but still. Kwaśniewski was in his office for next 10 years, so he was re-elected very easily after first term. And of course, you may find people presenting totally different opinions about him. There were some controversial events, elements of his behavior, personal behavior, but on the other hand, and I'm among those who think so, he should be really respected for the role he played in Polish international activity, foreign policy, as well as a kind of conciliator in our domestic politics. Most of the people saw him as the president of the country, the president of all of us, of all Poles, as we say. And he always tried to underline that. In mid of his first term, we adopted a new constitution in Poland. In fact, he was the first chairman of the Constitutional Committee of Polish National Assembly, and when he became the president, I replaced him in this role. So we adopted a new constitution. This constitution gives a lot of power to the president. In fact, the executive is shared between the government, the Council of Ministers, and the president, giving a bigger share of power to the government, however, giving a lot of power as well to the president. We tried to build the system based on the idea of balancing, checking and balancing. I still believe that that was right idea and that we adopted quite good solutions. However, in last 2 years, at least last 2 years, we have witnessed quite many conflicts between the president and prime minister, and many people blame for that the present constitution. I do not agree with these opinions. I believe this is a problem of political culture, the way the top politicians understand their roles and so on. But still, there is a growing belief in the country that we need to adopt a more clear system, either strengthening the president's position or just opposite, giving, in fact, full executive power to the Council of Ministers.
For our last question, we'll go way to the back of the room, and if I could ask you to please keep the question brief and the response, since we're running short on time, please.
Sure. I'm Sarah. I'm from the United States. I studied public diplomacy in graduate school, and I just wanted if you could briefly mention the extent of the influence of American propaganda during the Cold War and in terms of bringing about the end of communism in Poland in terms of magazines, film, Radio Free Europe. And then secondly, just if you could talk about quickly the reaction in Poland to the new U.S. change policy in terms of removing the ballistic shield, missile shield in Poland and the Czech Republic, and then the New Deal, Obama's New Deal with Medvedev.
Okay, speaking about the past, some institutions like Radio Free Europe played very significant role in informing our society. So for years that was the only source of independent information, independent news. Most of Poles tried to listen to this radio. I say tried because the government did everything to make it not hearable, not possible to be heard. So that was important. Then, when I was talking about Poland, I didn't mention that, in fact, even in old days of old system, we are a little bit different country than most of the other in Soviet bloc, with private property in our agriculture, with private entrepreneurship. We had 500,000 of private small firms in the end of communist system. And we had relatively more freedom in science and culture. So there were much more contacts between Polish artists and Polish culture and foreigners and foreign culture. So as a kid, I was going to the movie to watch American films, and that was. Of course, quite normal for everybody. So there was a lot of influence of some ideas from the States in the country. You should also remember about the fact that Polish-American relations have been a little bit specific, since there are over 10 million American citizens who declare their Polish roots, the Polish origin. So millions of Polish families had and have their relatives living in the States. So many Poles used to travel to the States already in the 60s, and of course even more later on. So yes, I may say that American activity, not only of propaganda type, played some role. We were among first countries of the Soviet bloc granted with scholarships, for instance, Fulbright scholarships. I'm a Fulbright alumni. 6 members of my government were Fulbright alumni. I believe it tells something. Thousands of us got the opportunity to study, to continue scientific research in the States, to get in touch with Americans, with the country, with the policy, with the history, and so on and so on. That was really important. And your second question was, the present reaction to the changes in American foreign policy. The official reactions were full of disappointment. The reactions by the ordinary people were quite positive. Most of Poles didn't want to have the shield in the country, believing that it will not upgrade our security, but just opposite. But what disappoints me, myself, I'm very frank telling about that, is the fact that also ordinary Poles are among most skeptical people as far as the presidency of Barack Obama is concerned. I say that frankly with disappointment, since I continue to believe that he has a chance to be a very important U.S. president and to make a very positive change in the policy of your country. But yes, many politicians in my country believe that one of the tests of the quality of our relations is American presence, military presence in my country.
What about the Pope's factor? The factor of the Pope.
Yeah.
Political life of Poland.
You are absolutely right speaking about the role of Polish Pope, John Paul II. It's my fault that I didn't say that. I'm sorry. The fact that Polish Cardinal Wojtyła was elected the new Pope, the first non-Italian Pope in the last 450 years, in 78, was of course very important, not only because and for religious reasons and consequences. The first visit of Pope to his native country, to Poland, in 79, when he said some very, very famous words to the millions of people watching him, listening to him, played a very significant role in encouraging people. So many people believe, and I share that belief, that at least to some extent the events of 1980, so the events which took place a year after first Pope's visit to Poland, were at least partially rooted in that important event. And then Pope played a very, very important role in those very sad days of martial law in the decade of the 80s, when most of us had no hope for the future. So the words of encouragement he shared with us, with millions of his compatriots, played a significant role. Yes, that's true.
On behalf of the leaders here, the participants, the fellow speakers, and really everyone from the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks.